Hi there, I am Elise Dewsberry from New Musicals, Inc., the producers of the web series So Proudly We Hailed, and I'm here with J.A. Moad II, who is the subject of our episode titled Judy Me. Now, Jay, you are a former Air Force C-130 pilot with over 100 combat sorties. Can you tell us what it was that made you decide to sign up, why you chose the Air Force, and maybe tell us a little bit about your service?
Well, my dad was a Vietnam vet, and he was a paratrooper, so he was an Army guy. And he used to tell me these great stories about all the stuff that he had done. He never really talked about the war in terms of the actual combat stuff, but he did like to talk about the adventures and the fun things he did, including jumping out of airplanes. So at some point, when I was trying to decide what I wanted to do, excuse me, I started talking about military academies, and he had responded, whatever you do, don't join the Army, because he remembered in Vietnam, pitching his tent and digging his own latrines while he would see the pilots walk into the air-conditioned buildings. So that was enough motivation for me to not do anything Army-related. And I wanted to see the world, basically. I wanted to experience something bigger than me, and so I thought flying airplanes would be a good thing to do, although I'd never actually been on an airplane. So my first flight actually to go to the Air Force Academy to eventually become a pilot was the first time I ever flew on an airplane.
Wow, that's fascinating, Jay, that you made that choice without ever having been on an airplane. How brave. You really do have a very impressive bio. I see that you served as an English professor at the United States Air Force Academy, and you continue to serve as an editor for their international journal that's called War, Literature, and the Arts. Your short stories, poetry, and essays have appeared in a variety of journals and anthologies. You're the recipient of the Consequence Magazine Fiction, and you were a finalist for the 2020 McKnight Fellowship in Playwriting. Now, with all of that experience as a writer, can you talk to us a little bit about how it was working with Philip to turn your story into a musical compared to your regular writing process, especially since, as we will learn through your episode, you actually have had a lifelong love of musicals?
Right. So, I didn't know what to expect. Obviously, as you've mentioned, I've done playwriting, and but I've loved musicals my whole life, and but I've never had any musical training. So, I can hear the songs how I imagine them in my mind, of course, like any writer would, I imagine, but I have no concept of how to put them down on paper. So it was tricky working with Philip. Obviously on Zoom, we were doing this. He's in, he's in England, or Scotland, I think. And that was very challenging, even to give my vision to him for what the tone and the mood of what I was trying to do. And so it took a lot of meetings, but from the start, he kind of knew what I wanted to do. We had a similar idea, and he liked it not being too light, but understanding that there were some dark pieces to it as well, or some kind of sad pieces. So, but I found it really rewarding, and getting his insights and hearing what he had to say, and also the fact that he was pretty experienced. He's done a lot of stuff, so I was impressed. And yeah, it was. I don't really know what else to say beyond that.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Can I ask you, how did you hear about the project So Proudly We Hailed, and what made you decide to apply for it?
So there's a book that's put out by it's the Missouri Humanities Council. They do a Proud to Be book. It's a collection of veteran stories, and I was an editor for it. I got to pick the award winner for the fiction award a few years ago, and they asked me to be the keynote speaker for their event. And one of the guys in there, Aaron Wallace, great writer, great poet, veteran. He and I got to know each other, and we kept in touch. And he actually saw this, and I don't know how I missed it, but he sent me a link to it. And I thought, because I had told him about another play I'd written, and I said, well, it kind of lends itself to being a musical in some respects. So he remembered that and forwarded me the link, and we talked about it. So that inspired me to look you guys up.
Great. And of course, as you mentioned, your episode sort of lent itself to becoming a musical. The episode itself focuses a lot on your relationship with your father, as you had mentioned earlier, and how it impacted your life and your decisions about joining the Air Force. Now, I understand that your father passed away recently. My condolences. Can you tell us a little bit about him and maybe how he would have felt about this project and his part in it?
So my dad was always, he was, let's see, I say a conundrum, but he was interesting in the sense that he was kind of this tough guy, this, Army airborne ranger type, drill instructor. So he had this gravitas about him, but he loved musicals, and it was interesting for me growing up watching him love musicals. So we'd watch them together. And of course, as a kid watching musicals, you have no idea that there's any stigma attached to it at all. So he and I would watch them, and he would sing along to the songs, and then I would sing along to the songs. It was kind of funny in many respects, but my kids know him in some respects, in many ways, through musicals. Like when we'd go visit, that was still something he loved even as he got older. So we'd watch some of these old musicals, Oklahoma, South Pacific, with the kids, and Bye Bye Birdie, which was actually one of his favorites. So it kind of created this bond that the kids kind of understand my father through that lens, and in some ways me as well. So yeah.
Oh, interesting. Great. And you yourself are a performer. You've performed on stage at the Library of Congress and at the Guthrie Theater as part of the Telling Project, Giving Voice to Veteran Experience. And your award-winning play Outside Paducah, The Wars at Home, had a New York debut at the Wild Project Theater in 2017, where you were nominated for Outstanding Solo Performance by the New York Innovative Theater Awards. And I also know that Judy and Me, the piece that we made an episode out of, is actually part of what you intend to be a larger work. Now, would you plan on performing that role yourself in the full version of the story? And do you have any plans for it to be a musical? And would you sing?
In Outside Paducah, I actually sing very little, just covering a little Johnny Cash. I'm not much of a singer, or at least I'm not trained. People say my voice is fine when I do sing. If the other play is called Waiting to Crash, The Making of a Military Pilot, it's effectively my story with a lot of subtlety in there about America and this taking on the flight through my life. And of course, musicals were instrumental in some ways shaping my decisions in life, as the musical Judy Me points out, this decision to go to the Air Force Academy. So I could definitely see myself performing that piece easily, and then adapting a few more parts in there too, song based on the work that we've done with New Musicals Incorporated. So I've gotten good feedback from several colleagues on it, including Brian Turner, who's an amazing war poet. And so we'll see what happens with it. But I think it would be fun because that piece is very layered. And this, in some ways, Judy and Me is a thread of that, like, and in some ways maybe 1/5 of the thread of the entire other piece. So,
right. Well, I would look very much forward to seeing the full version of it someday. That happens. Yeah. Keep us posted. Now, between your writing and your performing and your job, I understand you fly for Delta Airlines, and that must keep you pretty busy. What else are you? What's next for you, and how else are you filling up your life these days?
So, during the pandemic, I wasn't flying as much, like, the whole country was kind of grounded in some respects. So I had a little bit more time, and I thought I would be writing more plays. Of course, I ended up editing some more works, but I found myself kind of stagnating, like, okay, what's the future of theater? I don't even know right now. So I ended up working on a screenplay and adapting a novel I've written, an unpublished novel, into a full screenplay. And I've been working on that quite a bit over the last really 6 to 8 months. And but it's finally to that point where I'm very comfortable with it. And so we'll see what happens with that. But it's a whole, screenwriting is a whole different thing, right? It's the learning curve. I understand story very much so. I understand, in some ways, playwriting is closer to poetry, I always say, than it is to screenwriting. Screenwriting is closer to fiction, like a really scaled down version. But so I had to learn a lot, and I'm still learning in that whole process. But it's been fascinating, kind of teaching myself that. But also, I've got some friends who are screenwriters, so I've been working with them on some other projects as well. So so we'll see what happens. But I've got 2 or 3 other screenplays in my mind. The Writers Guild in LA actually is doing a veterans project where they work with vets to teach them to write screenplays, and then you get to pitch them to an agent. And I was waitlisted for, I think there's like 12 people. So they said I'll probably get to be in that program next year. So that could be interesting. Yeah.
Cool, great. So, a book, a play/musical, a screenplay, so much stuff that we can be looking forward to. Thanks. I want to thank you, Jay, for talking with me today. And I also really want to thank you not only for your service to our country, but also for your willingness to share your story with the rest of the world and with veterans out there. We really appreciate that. Thank you for working with us.
No, it's been a wonderful experience, growing experience for me, and also, and I appreciate the opportunity to take part in this. And it's that you guys are reaching out to vets, because there are a lot of vets with really interesting stories, and I think they're important to share those stories. It's another way of bridging that military civilian divide. So thanks for what you're doing.
Well, you're most welcome, and thanks again to you.
Good night.
Thanks so much.